It's ironic that Dragon raised Sabo, but never bothered to raise Luffy. But what if he had actually taken Luffy in and trained him? Could Luffy turn out stronger than he currently is in the original series? Well, for this to happen, at the age of 36, Dragon and an unknown woman had a son named Monkey D. Luffy. Instead of leaving Luffy in the East Blue, Dragon decided to raise Luffy as one of the revolutionaries. In Dragon's mind, if he had left Luffy with Garp, Luffy would most likely have become a Marine. By the age of 8, Luffy had begun training under the revolutionary members. It is likely that Hack taught Luffy hand-to-hand combat, while Lindbergh educated Luffy in science and engineering. Betty probably instructed Luffy in strategy and tactics for executing missions. Lastly, Terry Gilteo would have taught Luffy how to gather information effectively, make well-informed decisions for the cause, and analyze intelligence plays. Several years have passed, and Luffy continues his training with the Revolutionary Army. From dawn until dusk, his days are filled with intense combat drills, strategic planning sessions, and rigorous physical conditioning. The Revolutionary Army recognizes Luffy's potential and often assigns him to carry out critical missions alongside their elite members. Whether it's infiltrating enemy strongholds, gathering vital intelligence, or orchestrating sabotage operations, Luffy proves himself to be a valuable asset. In this timeline, Luffy's personality would be markedly different. The constant exposure to the Revolutionary Army's ideals and the gravity of their cause instills in him a sense of purpose and responsibility. We would see a more serious and intelligent Luffy, one who thinks before he acts and carefully weighs the consequences of his actions. His cheerful and carefree nature is tempered by a newfound sense of duty and determination. Also, it's important to note that in this timeline, Luffy wouldn't know Ace and Shanks since they haven't met yet, so he does not possess the ability of Gomu Gomu no Mi. Without the influence of these pivotal figures in his life, Luffy's journey takes a vastly different path. Instead of relying on the powers of the Gomu Gomu no Mi, he focuses on developing his natural abilities to their fullest potential. His fighting style becomes more refined and disciplined, incorporating the diverse techniques he learns from the Revolutionary Army. At the age of 13, Dragon returned to his home in the Goa Kingdom and witnessed the burning of the Grey Terminal. He saw the sorrow of his own people through Sabo, who was begging for help and expressing shame about his heritage. Eventually, Dragon rescued him from the wreckage and brought him to the revolutionaries' ship. Sometime later, the Revolutionary Army docked in Shimatsuki village for food and supplies. Upon hearing that the local dojo had resupplied them, he nodded in acknowledgement before announcing that they would be returning to Baltigo. After Dragon's return to Baltigo, Luffy meets Sabo. Just like in the original timeline, Luffy and Sabo were as close as brothers. They trained together under the guidance of the Revolutionary Army. Both Sabo and Luffy undertook missions and tasks with the members. Even at a young age, Luffy and Sabo successfully completed some challenging missions. At 17, Luffy ascended to the position of Chief of Staff number 2, while Sabo became the Chief of Staff number 3. In this timeline, Zoro would be executed by the Marines, while Nami would remain trapped in Arlong's service. Usopp would be killed upon discovering that the butler was a pirate. Sanji might survive Don Krieg's attack on the restaurant. Robin would likely be killed by Crocodile for deceiving him. Chopper would probably die at the hands of Wapol. Brook would be trapped in Thriller Bark indefinitely. Frankie, however, would likely be fine since CP9 was targeting Iceberg. Lastly, Jinbe would remain in service to Big Mom. Not to mention, all of Luffy's enemies from the original timeline would persist. Enel would wipe out the Sky Islands, while Buggy would never rise to any significant power. Crocodile would likely kill the royal family and destroy Alabasta. In the Marineford War, Luffy wouldn't be there to save Ace. So just like in the original timeline, Ace and Whitebeard would be killed. Blackbeard would acquire the Quake Quake fruit. Eventually, Shanks would intervene to stop the war. On Fishman Island, Hody Jones successfully assassinates the Fishman royal family. In Dressrosa, Doflamingo remains in complete control, while Luffy, Koala, and Hack investigate weapon smuggling. Deciding to check the Colosseum first, Luffy disguises himself in a large brown cloak and signs up for the tournament. To Luffy's shock, Doflamingo reveals to the city that the prize for the tournament is the Mera Mera no Mi. In the tournament, Luffy encounters his fleet from the original timeline. With years of training, Luffy easily defeats them. Notably, Luffy also encounters Jesus Burgess here. Eventually, Luffy defeats him and successfully claims the Mera Mera no Mi. Fast forward a bit, and the Big Mom pirates arrive at the island. As a result, Luffy and the others decide to retreat. On Whole Cake Island, Germa 66 might track down Sanji in his weakened state and still force him to marry Pudding. However, it's a trap, and without Sanji and Luffy, the entirety of Germa 66 perishes. Finally, Kaido remains in power in Wano. A few months pass, and it's revealed that Saabo has killed the king of Alabasta, Cobra Nefertari. In addition to the fiasco surrounding Saabo, there's also news about Vivi's disappearance. Ever since the news about Sabo murdering Cobra got out, the world government has intensified its efforts to catch him, but they're too late. Given that Luffy had already planned for this situation, he gathered the Revolutionary Army to save Sabo. Eventually, the mission is successful. In a failed attempt by the Marines to capture Boa Hancock at Amazon Lily, Blackbeard tried to steal her devil fruit, but was stopped by Rayleigh. This led to 800 Navy men and a battleship being seized by Blackbeard. Kobe offered himself to be abducted in place of the captured 100 men. Upon hearing this, Garp led a rescue mission with the next generation of Marines to Pirate Island. On Pirate Island, Garp was tasked with freeing Kobe and defeating the Blackbeard pirates. Despite the numerous commanders, Garp was confident until Kuzan, who was the 10th Titanic captain and a former admiral, appeared. As a former admiral, Kuzan was incredibly powerful and more than capable of fighting against an aged Garp. The two quickly engaged in a fierce battle where their powers clashed. For the majority of the fight, Garp appeared to be the superior one. However, after being tricked by the Blackbeard pirates into getting stabbed by Shiryu, the playing field was leveled. Realizing he couldn't defeat everyone and escape, Garp decided to stay behind. Kuzan's presence on the island posed a significant challenge that Garp might have otherwise easily overcome. After a grueling duel with the Blackbeard pirates, an exhausted Garp created an opportunity for the next generation of Marines. Despite his fatigue, Garp overwhelmed Kuzan and targeted Avalo Pizarro, the controller of the island. Using his Galaxy Divide technique, he split open Hachinosu's skull, which allowed Kobe and the other Marines to demonstrate their abilities. They collectively stopped Pizarro's attack and escaped, while Garp stayed behind and was frozen by Kuzan. Following Garp's defeat, the Revolutionary Army gathered information about Garp's invasion. Upon receiving this information, Luffy expressed concern and suggested to Dragon that they should save Garp and fight the Blackbeard pirates. However, Dragon rejected Luffy's idea and remained committed to his plans. After everything that happened, Vegapunk finds himself entangled in a series of events involving Bonnie, various conflicts with government agencies, and confrontations with powerful individuals. He embarks on revolutionary projects, such as creating satellites and artificial devil fruits, to bring about positive change and eliminate sources of conflict. However, his research and discoveries attract both admiration and hostility. Anticipating the hostility, York decides to betray Vegapunk and her fellow satellites in an effort to become a world noble. As a result of this betrayal, Vegapunk is abducted and imprisoned by the world government. Despite being gravely injured, Vegapunk continues to strive for the greater good. Just before his final moments, the world government arrives on Egghead Island. As tensions escalate, Egghead Island becomes the battleground where the forces of the world government clash with the valiant Revolutionary Army. Led by Dragon, the rebels wage a fierce struggle against the oppressive regime. But what does Dragon actually do here? Well, we don't know what his devil fruit is, but there have been theories that it is the Wind fruit. If we follow that pattern, he would have an insanely overpowered devil fruit, which makes sense seeing as he's the most wanted criminal in the entire world. Not to mention, if that awakens, then the world government is going to be in so much trouble. Luffy, Sabo, and other members stand tall against the formidable Gorosei. The Gorosei transform themselves into monstrous forms. Without hesitation, the Revolutionary Army launches a collective attack. As the battle intensifies, Saint Mercury and Mars target Dragon, seeking to stop the rebellion's momentum. Meanwhile, Luffy and others face off against the remaining Gorosei members. Despite their valiant efforts, the Revolutionary Army finds themselves at a disadvantage, lacking the power of Hito Hito no Mi model, Nika. Even with the strength of Luffy and Sabo, the Gorosei proved to be formidable opponents. Dragon would undoubtedly be ganged up on by most of the Gorosei and other members of the world government as more of the revolutionary members die off, seeing as he is one of the most dangerous ones there. The battle will last for days on end and will result in thousands of casualties on either side, with maybe even the deaths of some of the prominent characters. Eventually, the combined might of the Gorosei proves overwhelming, leading to the defeat of Dragon, Luffy, and the Revolutionary Army. The battle rages on for days, with the Revolutionary Army giving everything they have in a desperate struggle to turn the tide. Despite their resilience and determination, the absence of Hito Hito no Mi model, Nika's full potential hinders their ability to overcome the monstrous power of the Gorosei. The Gorosei, with their ancient and terrifying abilities, prove to be an insurmountable force. As the battle reaches its climax, the Revolutionary Army's defenses begin to crumble. The commanders, each a formidable warrior in their own right, fall one by one, their valiant efforts unable to stem the tide of the Gorosei's assault. As the dust settles on Egghead Island, the world government emerges victorious. If you like this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell.